Hi, my name is Campbell Wixted, and I'm an intern at the Museum of Childhood Ireland this summer. And my presentation is about Irish child labor from 1840 to 1860. So the period between 1840 and 1860 marks one of the most significant chapters in Irish industrial history, particularly in terms of the exploitation of child labor. And I'm going to be focusing on mining communities. So my presentation explores commission reports, census data, as well as interviews with laboring children to examine the conditions of child labor in Irish mines throughout the mid-19th century and the evolution to child labor. All right, so underpinning the entire background of mining operations in the UK and in Ireland was the power of coal and its importance to the British Industrial Revolution. So without the growth of coal and the growth of the coal industry, the British would not have been able to industrialize as quickly or as powerfully. So the abundance of coal allowed previously small manufacturers to centralize their operations and grow into large industrial operations. So many economic historians note that previous traditional industries, including flour milling and brewing beer, had become increasingly coal dependent by the end of the Industrial Revolution. So since the demand for coal rose exponentially, the number of collieries producing coal needed to grow as well. Collieries quadrupled from 1842 to 1856. In 1842, there were 567 collieries. Then just 14 years later, in 1856, there were over 2,400 collieries, including 19 throughout Ireland, marking an almost 500% increase. So not only did the number of collieries rise, but production outputs increased tenfold. So in 1750, 4,356 tons of coal were produced. Then 100 years later, in 1850, 46,337 tons of coal were produced. And then Ireland specifically was a key point for the British Empire to focus mineral excavation on in industries outside of coal. Ireland is very rich in silver, tin, and lead. So from 1780 to 1830, 25 silver and lead mines opened in the Southwest Line, spanning from County Dublin to County Clare. Okay. So the Industrial Revolution was centered around a lot of legislation. So this legislation furthered British industrialization as well as Irish industrialization. And the establishment of the Mining Company of Ireland, also known as the MCI, in 1824 was one of the highlights of this legislation. So the MCI became a hub for mining activities throughout Ireland. This company was highly successful and shaped the mining industry throughout Ireland. It thrived until the end of the 19th century when it eventually collapsed in the decades following the American Civil War in the 1860s. So the American Civil War led to a collapse in mineral prices, which severed the American market's connection to Ireland, marking the end of the Irish mining boom. And then one of these key points of legislation was the 1833 Factory Act. So to keep up with the rapid industrialization of the UK and in Ireland, all types of mines and collieries, including those for coal, tin, copper, and silver, they all employ children. Irish parents commonly brought their children to work with them to help support their families and gain an extra wage. Child labor was so common that when the 1833 Factory Act was passed, it explicitly defined a child as a person under 9 years of age and was prohibited from working. However, those aged 9 to 13 were allowed to work, but only for up to 9 hours per day, and those aged 13 and older had no restrictions on their laboring hours. Additionally, in further legislation, there was a distinction made. A child was defined as a citizen under 12 years old, and a young person was 12 to 18. And these two distinctions would legally define child labor in the coming decades. So, additionally, while the proportion of children in mining to children in other industries, for example, textiles, may have been lower in percentile, children still composed a large percentage of the workforce. So according to the 1841 census, minors aged 12 to 20 composed 28.4% of all minors in the United Kingdom. This would increase to 30.6% in the 1851 census. Additionally, in 1838, 5,000 children were employed in copper mines across the UK, and then 4 years later, it would increase to 5,764 children. Right. So child labor proceeded as a norm throughout history, the unacceptance of which is relatively modern. However, during the Industrial Revolution, the middle of it, the Queen of England declared a commission to ensure the welfare of children in labor throughout the UK, as well as Ireland. So Parliament, when defending this commission, wrote, quote, "It was indeed notorious in many of these occupations, great numbers of children employed at very early ages." So the Queen's decree outlined the Commission's goals, stating its purpose of, quote, "the investigation of certain branches of infant labor and the labor of young persons." So this also confirms that distinction of child labor and then young persons labor. So the goals of this commission ensured compliance with the Factory Act of 1833 with those limits on laboring hours and laboring ages, but also extended beyond just legal ramifications. And also to, quote, "investigate the actual state and condition of such children and the effects of their employment on their morals and their health." So the Queen declared this commission to be named the, quote, "Commission on Children's Employment." She then decided to divide this job as it composed quite a lot of children throughout a very large area. So she divided it into regions, so England, Scotland, Wales, and Ireland. And then within these regions, it was divided either by town or, in Ireland's case, there was a Northern Commission and a Southern Commission. This today doesn't have anything to do with the northern counties and the southern counties, that kind of division between the UK and Ireland. It was just kind of a line straight in half of the Ireland Isle. And then also there were commissions for each type of employment. So mines, manufactories, mills, and then more were all divided. Right. In the winter of 1841, the Queen of England established a subcommission to report on child labor in mines and manufactories throughout the UK. Subcommissioner Frederick Roper authored the first commission report on child labor, titled "Employment of Children and Young Persons in Mines and Collieries in the South of Ireland." So Roper was well known among Parliament members for his highly detailed and thorough reports on child labor throughout the UK and especially in Ireland. So Roper actually took the time to travel to each town within Southern Ireland with a mine or a colliery, and he reported on the conditions he observed by interviewing current children working in the mines as well as former child laborers, so current adults. In many instances, he ventured into the subsurface of the mine and kind of shadowed the child workers to really get a glimpse of their laboring conditions both above and below the mining tunnels. So Frederick Roper is best described as a, quote, "notably vigilant recorder of the conditions of employment in the south of Ireland." So Roper not only commented on the working conditions of children in the mines, but also during his interviews, he asked about their education, their family dynamics, and their just overall day-to-day life. Okay, so now diving into some of the mines of these children laborers, the first mine I'm going to be looking at is the Knockmahon copper mine. So within the mines of Ireland, children possessed a variety of jobs, from working on the surface of the mine to working in underground tunnels. Most children, so about half of the boys and all of the girls, worked on the surface of the mine. In this particular mine, Helen Hawk, a 12-year-old, has worked there for 2 years and states, "I've always worked at picking, which is picking out the pieces that have ore in them and throwing on one side the remainder." Anne Kavanaugh, a 21-year-old, has been working at this mine for 6 years, and she has, quote, "never worked and at any other than picking or cobbing for these last 3 years. I've been working at cobbing, which is breaking the ore down with the hammer. And then less common than picking or cobbing, which are the kind of traditional mining jobs, is tying. So tying bundles of sorted ore or waste was done to either be removed from the mining site or enter further processing. Nancy Mulcahy, an 18-year-old, has worked at tying in this mine for 3 years. So now examining another mine. This is a lead mine, the Kane lead mine. So in this mine, Bridget Cormerton states that she is, quote, 17 years of age and has been working here rather better than 3 years. So she works in cobbing, which is using the cobbing hammer to remove the waste and the rock from the ore. She then went on to jigging and started skimming, which is taking off the useless parts of the surface after jigging. So jigging, which involves just using a jig, which is a form of gravity separation equipment that kind of shakes minerals and then separates them based on their density, allowing heavier minerals, often the ore, to kind of sit in the base and then the lighter waste to wash away. 17-year-old Mary Cooney worked in the Cane lead mine. She works at jigging, which is, quote, considered the hardest work that any of the females work at. Also in this lead mine is James Matthews, a 14-year-old employee who has, quote, been working here for about 2 years at one of the washings, wheeling stuff to the washings. So Matthews works at both trunking, which is transporting the ore in wooden trunks and boxes, to the dressing floors or the water wheels, and then also washing, which is scrubbing the ore down to expose the rock. And then beyond some of these common tasks, some boys worked in more mechanical fields, including repairing equipment and building new machinery. John Dunn, a 17-year-old, has been working at this lead mine for 3 years. He started in cobbing and picking, like many of the child miners, and has now been, quote, working in the engine house, keeping the engine clean. All right. In the Alahites copper mine, Catherine Leahy, a 16-year-old, she's been working in this mine. She states that she has, quote, always worked at trunking, which is one of the washings, and that she has been working 4 years there. Catherine Foley, a 15-year-old, has been working at this mine for 3 years. She works at bucking, which is breaking smaller ore still smaller with a flat hammer. So this, like cobbing, involves a bucking hammer instead of a cobbing hammer, and it's used to grind or crush ore into a fine powder that allows for more ease of extractions. All right. However, not all of the mines operate on the surface. So underneath the surface of the mine, another operation exists. So 17-year-old Philip Murphy has been working at the Dromah Colliery for 3 years, and he is employed underground. His job is to fill in the coal as it is received by the miners into a wagon and then push this wagon to the bottom of the shaft, empty the contents, and then go back again. So his technical job is known as a roller or a hurrier. So he transports barrels, carts, and wheelbarrows filled with ore waste around the mining site for either disposal or further processing of the ore. Also working in the Dromah Colliery is 17-year-old Jeremiah Connolly. Connolly is an experienced hurrier, having been employed there for almost 10 years, starting at just the age of 7. He, quote, fills the coals into a wagon and pushes them to the foot of the shaft. So this colliery features a much more extensive underground operation than the 3 mines just discussed. In fact, at this colliery, all young persons between the ages of 13 and 18, and indeed many more who are older, are employed underground as hurriers, pushing the loaded wagons along the railways from the workings to the foot of the shafts. This and filling the wagons and buckets are their only employment. All right. So kind of a different angle to approaching mines is the different gendered tasks they would give the children. So girls and boys had different tasks within the mine. So mine owners justify their labor segregation based on the perceived strength of male versus female workers. So many mining operations preferred to employ adult male miners for their strength rather than children or young persons, and especially women. However, they did often accept children because they would get to pay them a lower wage than adult laborers. And even the women's wage was lower. The ideal subsurface miners were stout men, over 6 feet tall, a physique that many children and most women did not match, and the strength required to work underground in mines is immense. Despite the abundance of adult labor in both Ireland, of both men and women, none of the collieries in the coal fields of Ireland was a single instance found of any female child, or indeed female of any age, being employed in the coal mines in any underground work. To venture even further, the subsurface mine I just discussed, the Dromah Colliery, employs no women, surface or subsurface. Frederick Groper, the commission reporter throughout the south of Ireland, notes that females were not employed in any of the collieries in this county. Only 200 men and young boys. However, not only was this colliery not employing women, in the entire county of Cork, no females of any age, including adult women and children, were employed in any mining operations. In Irish mines, women were only employed on the surface, if at all. They were working sorting through the ore, moving waste around the mine, and further processing the ore. Contradictory throughout the rest of the UK, women, young girls, and female children were employed in all areas of the mine, performing both surface and subsurface work right alongside men and boys. And Roper comments that in many parts of England and Scotland, they employ children and young persons of both sexes as hurries, and remarks that in the south of Ireland, no females of any age are employed as hurries. So, despite working in both surface and subsurface mines throughout England, women were only found in the surface of the mine. Okay. So this concludes my presentation on Irish child labor from 1840 to 1860 in rural southern mining communities. Thank you so much and enjoy Heritage Week.